There's a line in the latest Elite Dangerous devlog that I've read a load of times and I can't work out what it actually means. It says over 75% of all started operations were successfully completed. Now this, of course, is presented as good news. It's sitting in a section called Key Operations Numbers next to 130,000 operations started. Now I'll come back to that line in a little bit because I think it's more revealing than what Frontier perhaps intended. But here's what I really wanted to make this video about today. Two things launched on at the end of June. One of them worked really well and one of them didn't. The one that worked well was the Nomad, a small, rugged landing craft that it sits like nothing else in the game. And you can walk around its inside even though it's small, and it's probably one of the best received things that Frontier have released in quite a while. And the thing that didn't work so well was operations. Initially pulled on launch day, back a few days later, but not only were there problems with the update itself, but it also started resetting people's exploration data. And all of these things taken together kind of pull Elite in two very different directions. Because the Nomad, with its potential for ship interiors, speaks to one future, and operations, along with Frontier's silence on this. I mean, they have patched it, they've mentioned a few things in the patches themselves, but they haven't actually spoken about the community backlash or community feedback. And that says a lot about another direction that Elite could head in. So, what does it mean? Where does Elite go from here? Now, I don't want to go too deep on operations because I have spoken about it previously in another video, but we should give some context at least for those of you who may not have seen that video. So operations is instance content. You pick it up at a menu at a station, and then you go into a matchmaking scenario where you're matched with a squad of up to 4 players. You then get moved into a separate purpose-built environment, and here you can complete various different objectives. You're then paid in a new currency with a weekly cap. It's a live service structure that many of you will be familiar with from other games, but it's very much outside of what we've seen with Elite Dangerous in the past. On the other hand, we have the Nomad, and this is just a very small ship. You can use it anywhere in the Elite Dangerous galaxy. You fly it down to a planet, you land, you get out of a seat, and you then, here's the new thing, you get to walk to the door. It's the only ship in the entire game where you can get out of the pilot seat and walk inside the cargo hold or indeed any other part of the ship. So nothing about this ship is instanced. You can just walk out of the door of the ship down onto the surface of the planet. And whilst this isn't true of ship interiors in the sense of something like Star Citizen, it nonetheless has gone down very well with the player base, and I personally have been very happy to see it. By that measure then, I feel that the Nomad has been a huge success for the game and potentially speaks to one direction of the future of the game. Operations, on the other hand, really hasn't gone as hoped. Now, I wouldn't call it a failure, but I don't think anyone would call it a full-on success either. There was the launch day pull, where things didn't go as initially planned when they first tried to deploy it. There were then follow-up server problems, carriers getting stuck in place, and then the real damage that came with things like players who were taking part could find that their visit data, their Star Wars exploration data, was then lost. Frontier, of course, did come around and fix all this and restore the data, but it was beside the point because this is a trust issue, and, it wasn't the only problem. There was cases where operations were being completed and then failing to pay out. There were also many other issues besides these. And perhaps the biggest bugbear of all when it comes to operations is that it feels like a very separate game to what we've come to know for Elite Dangerous. To all intents and purposes, it feels like another game embedded within the main game world. And for me, as I said in my previous video, it really feels like Elite Operations doesn't quite know what it's meant to be, what it wants to be, or who it's aimed for. And that's a big part of the problem, right? After all, just take one group of players, solo players, and there are a huge group of solo players. These people are really structurally disadvantaged for the new update for Operations because it is built for 4 players. And whilst there's nothing stopping them doing solo missions in Operations, they're fundamentally not going to be able to complete most of them. And then if you really want to split hairs a little bit, you've got explorers and traders and people who enjoy other parts of the game kind of feel like Operations perhaps wasn't for them. Ultimately, like I say, the deepest issue here is about identity. Elite's entire thing, its entire reason for existing right from day one, has been a huge, seamless galaxy where everything happens in one massive space. Operations, on the other hand, is a menu, it's a lobby. Wherever you make of the missions themselves, it is opposite of what the game tries to be itself. And although what you do in the missions can have impact on the power play and the background simulation or whatever else, it's still fundamentally separate, and that's why a lot of people have been making this as a CQC comparison. But I do want to be completely fair here to Operations because it was trying to solve a very real problem. Elite historically has never made co-op play a particularly easy thing to achieve. Whilst the game is multiplayer, of course, it does take a lot of work for players to get together into the whole same area and get set on the same missions and work together. And Operations does solve this, and it kind of solves it pretty well because, yes, if you've got a bunch of players, you've got a few friends that you want to go and do a few activities with, then Operations solves that very clearly and very cleanly. But it does come at the cost of its identity and being very separate from the main game. So we've got a few problems here, which is kind of why I was recounting them. We've got the problems with the design of Operations, and a lot of people, if you look on Reddit, the official Frontier forums, video comments and all sorts of other places, you'll find that generally Operations hasn't been received all that well. Of course, it's not full-on hate against it, it's quite divisive. Some people do like it, but I think it's fair to say that a lot of people don't like it as well. And then, of course, there are all the various issues with the way it was deployed as well, and all the different technical problems that come along with it. And that brings us on to another problem. Frontier, historically, over this time with Operations, have talked about all the delays. They apologised for them more than once. They gave everyone a free ship even when Operations was delayed most recently. They then talked about putting Operations on launch day when it didn't actually go as planned and they couldn't deploy it when they wanted to and had to try again later. They were actually willing to talk about it. But what Frontier have never discussed is how people are feeling about the Operations update itself, the poor reception towards it in quite a large part of the community, as well as all the various different issues. Now, of course, it would be unfair to say they've not said anything about it at all, because they have mentioned it in various different patch notes where they've discussed fixing and addressing these specific problems. But what they haven't done is any form of community outreach, trying to relate with the community about their various different feelings towards the game. And the latest update, the latest dev blog, really goes a long way to highlighting exactly this particular issue. They discuss the various different art approaches, they discuss the history of the Nomad, they discuss a load of other different things about various different stats on Operations. They don't discuss the problems with Operations itself. All of that goes completely unacknowledged, and it's totally bizarre to see after a bunch of years with Frontier being absolutely amazing with communications with their Frontier Unlocked live streams. Those, of course, were cancelled nearly a year ago in August of 2025, and communications from Frontier just haven't been the same since. Again, I'm not going to recount all of that history because if you know, you know. Or if you don't know, you're either new or have chosen not to pay too much attention to this anyway. Suffice to say that Frontier have gone through cycles in the quality of their communication. Like during their period with the Frontier Unlocked live streams, they've been very good. Like the period right now, they've been less than stellar. We get in these occasional devlogs, which are quite nice to see. I do welcome them actually, they're better than nothing, but they leave a lot to be desired, let's be perfectly honest here. They're nothing like what we had previously with Frontier Unlocked, which I would argue Frontier was perhaps at its best in terms of communication with their various different games. And all of this brings me back to the point I opened the video on. Successfully completed. What does this mean? Well, in the recent devlog, Frontier said that 130,000 operations have started, 130,000 operation missions, and 75% of them were successfully completed. So that means a 25% failure rate. But it's unclear exactly what this means because it could be read in many different ways. The most likely read of this is that it means the missions were registered as done and completed, that players decided to start a mission and 75% of them were successfully able to complete that mission. 25% through one reason or another didn't actually complete them. Maybe they just couldn't achieve their particular objective, and that's probably not unusual in a live service game. Not every mission that's accepted is completed successfully. There's also other ways of looking at this because one of the most reported problems of the entire launch was operations that finished and paid out nothing. Every one of those counts as a success inside that 75% because obviously the players did complete that mission. So does that one count as finished or not? Because once it did complete, it didn't actually pay out. So arguably it wasn't actually a success. What about all the technical failures that happened along the way? Missions that just crashed, that server disconnects and all of these sort of things, they included in the 25% of missions that didn't actually complete. Now, I'm not here to tell you that 75% or the success rate is good or 25% failure rate is bad in and of itself. What I'm trying to point out is the nature of the communications from Frontier. They've just given us some numbers and expected us to understand what these mean on the face of it. And whilst there is an assumption here that successfully completed means literally people who took on a mission and completed it, it's still not entirely clear. And I kind of feel that on the face of it, this little snippet of information gives us a perfect insight as to where Elite Dangerous and Frontier are today. In other words, things aren't as clear as they should be, or they could be. What does this mean for the future of Elite Dangerous? Well, only time will tell, but we do know that the Nomad was a very good success, and that to me speaks to the future direction of the game as a whole. I do think that ships have a good bearing for the future of the game, not necessarily in the way that Frontier handled them, because I do feel that they've led to power creep, which is a problem in and of itself, and I'm not a big fan of the way they sell the ships. But that said, introducing new features and capabilities does serve as a way of expanding the game. On the other hand, we've got things like operations which don't quite seem to know what they want to be or who they're aimed for, and even though they have been released, they don't seem to work initially quite as expected, and even when they do work, they're not perhaps the right type of fit for the game itself. And then, yet again, on another hand here, by another token, we've still got future content still planned for the later part of this year. Right now then, Elite Dangerous feels like a hodgepodge mix of various different things, both positive as well as not so good. And I can't help but feel that during the days of Frontier Unlocked, we just didn't see this type of problem whatsoever. And that, to me, is something that's sorely missed. We could go back to those times, and I think that would be very welcome. At any rate, let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below, because I'd love to hear from you. Maybe Frontier will read those comments, and just maybe we can see a bit of progress on Frontier's comms, because I do feel they need a bit of improvement. Thanks for watching this video all the way through. There is another one on the screen right here. Do take care, and I'll catch you next time.